Welcome, everybody. I'm Dr. Luann Fortune with Saybrook University in the College of Integrative Medicine and Health Sciences, where I currently serve as the interim chair of the Department of Mind-Body Medicine. And I am very pleased to welcome tonight our two speakers who will be talking to us about their original research. The Dean's Seminar has the proud role of featuring research, some of the greatest research that comes out of Saybrook University and out of our college. And of these presenters tonight, these scholars, are going to tell you about their original work. During the course of our live presentation, we will also be taking a break for discussion and question and answer. For those of you who are watching this on recording, you will not hear that part of it, but we hope that you can continue to enjoy their presentations. And if you have questions, you can communicate to us through our YouTube channel. So I am going to introduce, we have two speakers tonight, and we're going to start with Dr. Elaine Blasi, who is a 2025 graduate from our Humanistic Psychology department and program. Her research was titled The Creative Container of Home, the Prepared Environment. And Elaine and I were talking just before we came online about our common love and interest in Montessori education. Elaine has over 40 years of experience in Montessori education, serving students through the university, from early childhood through the university. She holds a Bachelor of Science in Foreign Service, an M.Ed. in International Ed, a PhD in Psychology and AMS credentials in early childhood and secondary 1 and 2. She is a past AMS board and SAC member. She's the superintendent emeritus of Hayward Twin Oaks Montessori School, the secondary 1 and 2 program director instructor with CAMTEP, a university supervisor with Chaminade University, TEP, and the president of Integration Creation, LLC, a creative consulting company. And I just found out earlier this evening that she also founded a Montessori high school. So Elaine, welcome tonight, and thank you for sharing your research with us. I'm going to hand the podium over to you.
Thank you, Luann. All right. So the formal title of this dissertation is Exploring the Creative Container of Home with Montessori Credentialed Teachers. And it's a hermeneutic phenomenological study. And I wanted to just shout out the amazing committee that worked with me. Robert Cleve was my chair, Dorianne Cotter-Lockhart, and Melinda Rothaus were on the committee. So I kept that in there. Terry Goslin-Jones, who's here with us tonight, actually was the first person I met at Saybrook. And when I started thinking about when she asked me once, what do you think you want to do your research on? I said, not Montessori, doing something totally different. Absolutely not Montessori. And she said, okay. And I know, like, silently she was giggling, because any class I took with her, Montessori kind of crept into all kinds of sharing and posting and research. And I just couldn't run away from it any longer. So I start this whole presentation with, of course, one of Montessori's particularly important quotes about the prepared environment. The child has a different relation to his environment. The child absorbs it. The things he sees are not just remembered, they form part of his soul. He incarnates in himself all in the world about him that his eyes see and his ears hear. Nothing has more importance for us than this absorbent form of mind. which shapes the adult and adapts him to any kind of social order, climate, or country. So I moved from that to what am I thinking when I think about the prepared environment, and how did I get to this whole desire to study the absorbent mind and the prepared environment further? Well, it actually was in Dorian's class called Creativity at Work when I started looking at all of the research behind creativity in the workplace. And I kept thinking, I know about that. That's all about the prepared environment. And that's all about sensorial education, getting in touch with our senses. And really, it's all about how do we create an environment to be most like home that would support our senses and at the same time, therefore, support creativity. And then looking at, well, what is that entire process and learning more about embodied cognition. I actually happened upon embodied cognition in my work as a yoga instructor, as a yogini, through Reginald Ray, who wrote about embodied meditation. So that was my topic background. But then I had to come up with a problem statement. What am I trying to do here? And I realized there was more than enough data about creativity in the home, in the workplace, in classrooms, with individuals, with workers, with students. But there was almost no focus on the sensory experiences in the home environment, especially the home environment, the impact of those experiences on the creative process, intentionally preparing a home environment with sensory elements to enhance creativity. So then I realized the goal of the research, or the problem I was addressing, was to add to that discussion and to bridge the connection between what I came to call the ecology of space and place and the Mobius of embodied cognition. And I started really looking at, what do I mean by that and where am I going with that? This is the formal research question: the lived sensory experiences of home that contribute to the creative process for, specifically, my participants, Montessori credentialed teachers, and ultimately inform the preparation of their classrooms. My conceptual framework, some of the writers who started and the researchers who started my brain moving in these directions, in no particular order, but they do move from one to the other. Montessori and her concept of the house of the children, Casa dei Bambini. Tuan, who I found, it was a gift to me, and his whole definition of what is space and what is place. Hill, who is a Jungian, his definition of home, building on Jung's definition of home. Of course, Rhodes' 4 Ps of creativity. And then Roger's definition of creativity, Glavinow's A's, the 5 A's of creativity, Ruth Richards' definition of everyday creativity, but then looking at Merleau-Ponty and how he looked at experiential sensorial work, Clark's definition of embodied cognition, Diane Ackerman, who I have always loved and read, and her history of the senses. And then back to Montessori and her whole sense of and concept of sensorial education and how you use that that theory to inform preparing your environment, which then led me, interestingly, to Gibson's affordance theory about, sorry, I said theory and my phone thought I said Siri, about how all organisms adapt to their environment and the environment adapts to the organism. So in taking a deeper dive, the lit review highlights I needed to go much deeper into the prepared environment. So I worked on with Lillard and Chawla, more sensory experiences. I list them there. The embodied cognition piece was someplace where I really had to take the time to learn more and more. And many writers came through for me. Two of them most important to me were Plasma and Varela. And then really looking at, besides Jung and his sense of home, the more modern writers who are looking at home and architecture and design to affect the psychological wellness and also creativity for folks. My methodology was, as mentioned in the topic, hermeneutic phenomenology, because I felt it could best support sensory experience research. And what undergirded my argument was Heidegger and Merleau-Ponty's feelings and research and theories about how you holistically experience the world instead of just understanding the world. How the outer environment plus the inner psychic environment moves you towards integration. And then if you're going to do hermeneutic phenomenology, most people move to Van Manen and his research process. I had 7 participants, all from the same school, which was very important, but all from the different program levels of a Montessori education. So people who worked with toddlers all the way through people working with middle school students. I did not have high school teachers in this study for no other reason but that there were no schools that were AMS, American Montessori Society accredited, that had early childhood through high school, except my own, and I could not do the research in my own. So fun really started happening when I was challenged by Robert Cleve to, you need to find a really good interview protocol in order to capture this data in the way in which you would most like to capture it. And I happened across something that was absolutely perfect for Montessori teachers, and that was Dinkins' Socratic interpreviewing. So you interpret as you interview, because it is a Socratic dialogue with your participants. So that it's a built-in hermeneutic circle, which was just too much fun. During my practicum, I put together the interview protocol with 3 highly experienced, I call them the grand dames of Montessori, educators who were not going to be my participants, obviously, but I wanted to get their input and feedback on the protocol so that it was tight. And then I decided to, as part of the interpreviewing, to actually do something called concept mapping, Streep's concept mapping. And that then allowed for me to have not 1, but 2 meetings with the participants after the interview process, so we could highlight their transcript. So each of them got their transcript of the interview and then put together a concept map. And it was really sweet. This past summer, they each received from me a copy of the dissertation, but then they received a copy of their own concept map for them to, and it's in color and it's beautiful, for them to keep, frame, whatever they'd like to do. So that was a fun way of saying thank you so much for participating. Of course, Van Manen's process is right there. One of the reasons I absolutely wanted to have all of the teachers from the same school was especially for the in vivo coding, the argo, in other words, using their subculture's vocabulary to make sure that I didn't have too many variables in the research. I used in vivo coding, so verbatim quotations throughout, and the concept mapping, as I mentioned earlier. And then I used Saldana to theme the data, and we came up with 5 themes. Oh, okay, let's move. There we go. So as we moved through the work, my findings pointed me in the direction of really looking at the way in which the participants defined the terms home, creative process, and preparation of their environment, whether their home environment or their classroom. And the categories of focus as I was doing the interpreviewing turned out to be sensory experiences, creative process, and preparation. It just fell into those categories. And the themes, well, first of all, the definition, the asterisk denotes the definition that I had, which they did not know in advance, because part of the Socratic interpreview is after they discuss the answers to their the questions in the interpreview, I then offer mine to them. And so for me, home was a sanctuary. For them, it was a place of safety, community, and support. Prepared environment, you see that, and creative process there. But I want to move a little bit faster to talk about the themes. So the themes that they came up with um, uh, when talking about sensory experiences, the overarching theme was comfort. There needs to be comfort to have creativity. And their sub-themes were it has to be calm and it needs to be organic. Organic literally and organic figuratively. The creative process, the theme that they came up with was there needs to be empowerment to have a creative process and there needs to be order. And when they were discussing about preparing an environment, they felt it was so important to ensure that there be safety in the environment that they prepared and balance, a balance of all the elements. Some of their quotes, which I am not going to go over and read aloud, but just for you to have a moment. There's in talking about sensory experiences, comfort using all 5 senses. They wanted a calm, multidimensional tactile sense. And organic, they were speaking very often of fractals and patterns. Under creative process, the second theme, empowerment, they actually came up with a formula when I read through all of their quotes, and it basically the formulas actually 2 formula. Internal knowledge plus external respect is going to give you empowerment, and if you know yourself, but at the same time you know the cosmos around you, you will come to self-actualization. They were an extraordinary group of people. The third theme, order, they spoke of symmetry and fractals again. Preparation, they spoke, as I mentioned earlier, safety. And again, another formula, safety plus predictability equals flexibility and equals resilience. And I wasn't surprised that they all spoke of the importance of building an environment that helps to support resilience for themselves and their families at home and also in the classroom. And finally, the theme of balance. It was clear that they were integrating their other themes, that if we have safety, if we have comfort, if we have empowerment, if we have order, then we have a balanced environment. And that's where they can be themselves and be comfortable. and they can be more creative, they being their students or themselves in their home or their families in their home. So when I looked at the implications, I came up with these three phrases: the ecology of space and place, meaning that if we have an integration of the person with which is our place, our inner place is our person, with the press, which is our environment, then we have embodied cognition. And what is the Mobius of embodied cognition? A Mobius being a spiral that continues, that we come into the world absolutely concrete. Everything is sensorial for an infant. And we don't start abstracting information until we're probably around 9, 10 years of age, fully starting to abstract. And we don't fully, completely know how to abstract until we're in adolescence. But then somehow we just pull ourselves out of our bodies and stay completely in our minds. So what was most impactful about this study for me was being able to look at creativity as a way to get us back into our bodies and spiral through that Mobius of embodied cognition so we can go from concrete to abstract, ethereal to physical, and back to physical. So we start at concrete and go back to physical so that we can use our bodies as our home. And then the creative container of home is the creative product and the creative press at the same time. It's the origin and the destination. It's the journey itself. If you can prepare your home to be a creative container. So for future research, I'm actually working right now with people, with schools, with training programs, but also informally speaking with people about workplace design. So embodied cognition in workplace design. I'm actively working for a classroom design curriculum for teacher credentialing programs, Montessori teacher credentialing programs, but I'd love to reach out to other credentialing programs. Sensory experiences and creativity within home and workspace design, multisensory elements affecting home design, sensory foundations of a balanced environment of any kind, and then something which I find very important to look at eventually, but I am not doing it now, the effects of a disruptive, traumatic home environment on an individual's sensory input and creativity. So the conclusions, yeah, I did answer the research question. Sensory experience do contribute to specific feelings that then affect creativity within a home environment. And the classroom, which we knew may be intentionally prepared, but maybe specifically intentionally prepared towards creativity. I believe that the research bridged the dialogue relating to the topics of lived sensory experiences in home and creativity, and how these topics interact with each other toward any workspace, preparation. And hopefully added to the academic discussion about the ecology of space and place and the Mobius of embodied cognition using the data that these very generous participants allowed me to gather. Of course, my references, questions